Hello, my name is Diane Duncan, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the neural architecture that we use to see and process faces. Before I go into that, I'd like to show you some pictures, and I'd like to think about what you see when you look at them. Starting with this picture of an ordinary sink. What about this picture of a car's tail light and exhaust? Finally, what do you see when you look at this house? If you saw faces in these objects, then you would be like most people. The human tendency to see faces in random visual data is called facial pareidolia. A lot of our neural real estate is devoted towards recognizing, processing, and orienting towards faces, which is why they feel like this tendency seems to be so common in humans. The fusiform face area is the first identified and the most studied region of the brain that is involved in facial recognition. But many more have been discovered since that initial discovery, among which are the occipital facial area, the V1 area of the visual cortex, the posterior superior temporal sulcus, and the amygdala. These structures are activated more in the right hemisphere than the left hemisphere when recognizing faces, or even face-like objects. But what happens if you don't recognize faces? Well, then you suffer from a condition known as prosopagnosia, which is when everyone is basically like a woman on Fox News to you. Prosopagnosia is defined as the ability or impaired ability to recognize a face that a person has seen before. This affects both recently encountered faces and faces that are well known to the individual. It's not due to problems with vision, object recognition, or memory. It can be developmental or it can be acquired through disease or injury. Sufferers usually rely on other cues to recognize people, such as voice, clothing choices, and mannerisms. So if you know somebody with prosopagnosia and you change your hairstyle, they might not recognize you. There are different types of prosopagnosia. For instance, there's associative prosopagnosia, and that's when you don't know where you know a face from, and there's apperceptive prosopagnosia, which is when you usually have trouble telling one face from another. A person with apperceptive prosopagnosia might not even be able to judge somebody's age or gender. Prosopagnosia can be found in people with damage to any of the previously mentioned brain structures, save the amygdala. Damage to the fusiform face area usually corresponds to apperceptive prosopagnosia, whereas damage to the interior temporal region seems to correspond with associative prosopagnosia. Developmental prosopagnosia is a lot harder to understand, though it is often comorbid with autism. When people trained children with prosopagnosia to attend to the space between facial features in an attempt to improve their ability to recognize faces, there was improvement in facial recognition. Unfortunately, this improvement disappeared when the angle of the faces changed, so there's not much hope there. Oxytocin has been shown to increase a person's ability to recognize faces, but this advantage is transient and it goes away with time. Which begs the question, if the amygdala is used in facial recognition, then why isn't damage to the amygdala correlated with prosopagnosia? Well, the amygdala activates when we process emotions in faces. The amygdala seems to activate when people are assessing if a face is trustworthy or not. The amygdala is more active than the fusiform face area in directing your attention to faces that seem threatening or away from faces that seem neutral. The amygdala reacts more strongly to faces than other objects or scenes, even when the faces aren't showing any strong emotions. This difference in activation is more pronounced in the amygdala than it is in the fusiform face area, so clearly the amygdala is important when looking at faces. It seems the amygdala is why you see emotion in faces or even face-like things, like a sink. So here are my references. Thank you very, very much for listening all the way to the end. I hope that you keep learning about the brain because it is a fascinating, fascinating machine. Thank you. Goodbye.